All right, traders, good afternoon. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Thursday, May 7th, and another crazy day in the markets. My goodness. The momentum in the software space, as well as I guess you could separate that to the cyberspace and also the payment processors. Whew. Uh, just another crazy momentum day with the overall market not doing like a bunch of like crazy things. Again, it seems to be with the overall market that we're kind of just staying in a tight range through the day. We saw a little bit of a move down in the afternoon, not quite as dramatic as we saw. Not that Tuesday and Wednesday were that dramatic, but we did see some end of day profit taking or selling on some headlines, right, on Tuesday or Wednesday, like the last hour of the day. Today was just a little bit of I would call it maybe just a little bit of a fade from the highs. But again, we're seeing these big moves in the after hours market. It doesn't really. I mean, there's so many things that don't seem to really matter right now, but one of which is the last couple of days we kind of close on some selling pressure, and then the overnight market just completely forgets about it, and we manage to close or to excuse me to open up higher. So again, it does seem like the majority of the gains, or a good amount of the gains for the overall indices. Let me make sure I say that right. That correct. But I think the majority of the gains in the indices we're seeing right now in the overnight market. Individual names in different groups, it's a different story, right? I mean, and clearly with some of the things that were on the tape today, Twilio was up 40% today. PayPal, after already running a lot, was up 15% today. And then if you just go further down, look at the recovery that happened in Ring. Ring was down, after the close yesterday on earnings. I mean, and just so on and so forth. I could come up with a whole bunch of other names. One name that was not on my list, which this name is killing me to look at because I had tried a swing trade in this probably about 2 to 3 weeks ago. I'll wait for this to come up here. But look at this thing up to 135 up 21%. So you know, if you caught some momentum today and some of these names, congratulations. This just brought the whole group higher. I mean, CRWD was a name that was already moving really nicely to the upside. But we started to see a whole bunch of call buying in names like Datadog today, that I think a bunch of traders in the room and in the Tribeca Trade Group room capitalized on. One of the names that I went long yesterday, looking for a move into earnings. Right, I talked about in yesterday's video, three different earnings trades. Right, so the pre-earnings trade, the buy the dip after a name reports. I did that with Peloton yesterday, which worked out tremendously well. Just kind of looking at the short interest, but look at this name. All kinds of call buying into this name. So today, right, and I positioned in this thing yesterday. So this was really a nice winner for me today. Here's the trade that I put on yesterday. Uh, da, 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 da. Right, I added net at 24.99, looking for a run into earnings. I mean, it went up to it went up to $29 today, so I didn't hold it all the way through that. Again, I am fully transparent. And where did I sell this thing at? I'm afraid to look. Uh, I just thought it was, again, like everybody needs to improve on things. I mean, I certainly could have held this thing. I hit target there, and then I try to hold it for a little while longer. Target, but I think I can't find it here. Maybe I forgot to paste the last portion of it, but I don't think I think right around 27. But again, these things, if you're really hooked into a couple of these names, I just can't do that too because I'm managing a trading room. I'm looking for option activity. So if and I hate to say this, but if I were just purely just watching some of these names rather than balancing, managing a trading room and everything else that I do, I think I would be able to kind of hold these things a little bit longer than I do. So that's why, I can't just stare at them, basically throughout the session, because I've got to catch the next winner for you guys. But Pins was another one. I forgot about this one, but they were buying the dip in this one as well. I tried that one again. I was out of it pretty quickly. And once I sold it, I was like, oh, there was probably no reason to sell it, but I just wanted to kind of capture a quick gain and move on. What else? So let's talk a little bit about, not every trade, of course, was a winner for me today. I tried putting on a call spread for Tesla. Tesla really didn't do anything today, so I didn't want to gamble with that into tomorrow. We've got obviously a monthly jobs report, which again, I think similar to what's been going on with these weekly jobless reports, is that the market is already expecting like a dismal report. So I don't think that we're going to get a lot of volatility tomorrow, but I don't have a crystal ball either. Really, again, with the economic numbers that come out, if something comes out different than expectations, then the market will react. But if it comes up somewhat in line with expectations, then there won't be much of a move, right? If you look at today's number, right, where was the expectations for this? 3 million, right? And it came in a little bit higher than expected. Probably not enough to move the needle, somewhat in line with expectations. So the same thing with this number tomorrow. I mean, these numbers are ginormous. So that's the story with that for tomorrow. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I put software sizzles on here. Is it too crazy that we're seeing these moves? So let me talk to you about what I think of the software names, right? The application, the enterprise, the infrastructure, the cyber names, right? I think that, again, these are basically the haves in the market right now. They're the ones who are in the right place at the right time. They're making businesses more efficient. And they're capitalizing on the situation, right? That everybody is moving to more digital, right, than they have before. So this is not new for me. If you've been following me for a while on Twitter or YouTube, or if you've been in the room, you know that I've been on this trend of the software names for a good couple of years. I actually put together like one of the first indices that I was using on Bloomberg. And with all the software names before a lot of people were talking about them. I don't want to say I was the first, because that's not right. But I was very early in this move. So this move's been going on in these names for a long time. Now, there's two arguments here. Is that, yes, I just talked about the positives, right? In regard to the fact that they're in the right place at the right time in this situation, and they've been this way because as companies over the years want to basically automate and become more efficient, and rather than build their own technology, they hire a ServiceNow or a Salesforce to do the work for them. And same thing with the smaller companies too. I mean, I use some of the technology, not all of them. I would like to be using a little bit more, but of course, I use Zoom and I use Slack and I use a few other ones too. But they're the companies that are really helping small businesses, right? So this is nothing new. Now these are the positives. The negatives are they're a very expensive bunch, right? And everybody will start to look at sales multiples and so forth. So you have to be kind of careful with this, right? And by the way, everything that we're going over, of course, is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. But in terms of trading, right? This is what I basically do. Right, so I manage a couple different portfolios. I talk about this all the time, and one of which, right? So I manage a trading account, and I also manage what's called the tactical portfolio. And the tactical portfolio, it's kind of like my best in breed names that I really like, and I own things like, Shopify's in here, PayPal's been in here. Now I reduce these names because I think you have to be smart and kind of manage your event risk, and I reduced ATVI as well. But I've been in these names very early. I've owned the Shopify for a long time in this portfolio, and you could see some of the other ones that I own as well. I put in CrowdStrike, which is a name that I was playing more or less in my trading account, but I wanted to kind of move it into like I think that the trend is going to be here for a while in cyber names. So how do you kind of manage this on a day-to-day basis? Well, if you're in our trading room, you can basically kind of catch these moves and day trade them and so forth. And you don't, when you're trading and when you're doing the trading that's in front of you for a day trade, and you see all kinds of momentum in a Cloudflare or a Datadog or Slack, you could capitalize that based on the momentum that you kind of caught for the day, right? And then like what happened with this name today. I mean, this gave you a really nice trading range. Look at what the name's doing, by the way, on you know on the actual earnings. So this is the earnings trade that we talked about, where playing a run into earnings, and look at what it's doing afterwards, right? So you could buy it here if you like, but basically the option activity that we see on the tape, I go over this all the time. I don't really care if they're going to be right or if they're wrong at the end of the day. I know that it creates, for me, a trade idea, and also it creates on the tape short-term momentum because everybody sees what they're doing. Everybody sees that they're buying options, and also that look at the volume that happened today as well. And you don't have to know if they're going out like a couple weeks or a month. You don't have to know any more than what basically than that is that you're using that as a catalyst for you as a day trade, right? So then you don't have to worry about the multiples and all that stuff. So that's the one way you could trade it. Or if you want to swing trade these names, you use the correct position size, right? So meaning, if you're more worried, and if it is a volatile name, make sure that you're adjusting your trade size based on the volatility of the name. Right, so that's basically how I think you have to be super disciplined if you're trading these names. Uh, in my opinion, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. I've been talking about how, I still think this growth versus value has to correct, but I'm not going to try to predict that day that occurs. Do I think that's coming on the horizon in the next probably couple weeks where these names really get hit and sold off hard? Yes, because it always happens with these names. So that's what you want to kind of keep in the back of your mind. You also want to maybe try to profit from that. We talked about that in the pre-market session. When these names do correct, have a ETF or one particular name that you're going to buy puts in, because they will move quickly to the downside. Because why do they move so quickly to the downside? Because they're very high multiple names, and it's one of the first places that people take profits in first. All right, so I'm giving you a couple thoughts that are a couple moves ahead with this group. So that said, over the long term, I think these names are great, but you have to realize when they get superheated. So I will continue to try to participate them because I'm a trend trader and will continue to follow the trend in these things. But you just kind of have to realize that at some point there will be profit taking in these things. All right, so that's been the tricky part of trading this move with, what we're seeing with the lockdown that we're facing and the coronavirus and the day-to-day life is that these names are benefiting. They are the haves, and other areas like the banks and obviously travel names and the airlines are the have-nots. Now the have-nots will bounce from time to time, but for the most part, they're in downtrends. All right, I got a lot of questions. I typically, follow that protocol of a trend trader. I'm basically positioning in names that are in uptrends. I'm looking for pullbacks into uptrends. Am I looking to buy, major dips? Like I got a question today on one of the banks, which I'll answer the question. Like, Wells Fargo. This to me, if you follow any bit of trend trading, and I would always point out that book, Trend Trading, is a very good book. But this is not ever something I'm going to try for a big trade. Something like Wells Fargo or one of these banks. These names are in downtrends. There's reasons for these. Another question that I keep getting is about, or I keep seeing on the internet, is about the airlines. Right, this Jets ETF keeps seeing inflows from Robinhood investors. Because just because a group is down, that isn't a reason to buy it. I say this over and over and over. Now, the airlines could bounce and so forth. That's fine. But for me, it's not a trade for me. Other than taking a small flyer, I like to take a flyer every once in a while. Get it with the Jets ETF, but this, like, they're in downtrends. There's a reason why names are in downtrends. I think it really, for retail investors, it's a big learning curve. I think retail traders like the Robinhood accounts, they want to buy anything that goes down. And I've learned this too over time, that you want to have three reasons why you buy something, and just because it's down is not a reason, right? So, again, the reason why I go over this stuff is to try to help you guys, so that you kind of, don't make the same mistakes that a lot of retail traders, trade in. But there's a reason why this is at 52-week lows, and IGV is doing this, right? So my philosophy is to stick with the trend, stick with names that are going up, right? Just like, if you look at Amazon 10, 20 years ago, right? And people said the same thing about Amazon years ago, that oh, it's an expensive stock, they're not making any money, right? And that's been the same story with the software names. But again, to kind of just make sure that I'm hitting this point home, is that at the same point, if you're doing trading versus investing, you want to make sure that you're taking profits when things run up. Just being very, having some common sense with this, with trading, and being logical, right? I mean, they were saying that all the way back here, that Amazon was expensive, right? When it was $500, when it was 400, when it was 300, right? So that's, in my opinion, the same thing with the software, with some of the software names. So again, that's my opinion on momentum, and what we're seeing right now. I do think there will be a day of reckoning that comes with some of these names where they do get hit, and those are usually the buying opportunities. But it's and the other reason why I bring this up is those are the buying opportunities when the group gets hit, and also when they're coming out of consolidation. But you want to be careful about chasing up here. All right, so that's my thoughts on today. That said, let's go over a couple names. I tell you, this market is not making it easy to play some names. ISRG is a good one that I think is a good example of that. ISRG is a medical device company that really hasn't been doing much, and just is coming out of like very, very tight coiled behavior. So this was a name that we had talked about this week. It's making a break out of value. But how do you trade this thing? The options are impossible. The option market makers have gotten very wide in some of the names that they're quoting. I looked at this thing a couple times today. I could not find an option to play, and stock probably the right thing to do. Same thing with Chipotle. Chipotle, which I've been watching for a while too, didn't make that strong of a move, but I do think there's more upside to go for Chipotle. I just bought stock in this thing. I think it gets up to 1927. Look at this sideways pattern. So this is finally coming out of this. But I tell you, the options are really difficult to put a big trade. You could take a flyer, right? You could go long a little bit of Chipotle in options, but it's tough to put on a big size position because the width of the spread is ginormous in these options. A couple other names that we were watching today, we'll hit. We'll talk about, ones that could possibly still have room to go. This Slack, I think, is really interesting. If it gets above, it is so close to getting above $30. So it's nice to have names too where you don't have to jump into them, right? I think of this thing, it kind of looks like a messy reverse Head and Shoulders. Not exactly fits the mold here exactly, but from a perfect inverted head and shoulders pattern. But if this thing bounces out, it's got a lot of open runway. I don't see very many speed bumps. I don't see very many version point of controls that you have to watch out for. So I think this thing can run a little bit more if it stays above $30. One that we also saw some call buying out a little bit further was TPX. So again, just try to have something a little bit different in here. TPX, if we look at this, it's been making a nice move here. And I would watch, again, what I like to do is zoom in on the 1 hour because it gives you just some nice levels to trade from. So this hasn't triggered for me yet. I looked at it a couple times, but really 55.50 would be confirmation. And then you could use that as your stop. But I usually like to wait for a little bit of confirmation first. Keep it on my radar, set an alert, and then go ahead and attack if it actually triggers. What else? I think we covered most of these other names, so I think that's it for the day. Guys, have a great night. And again, this market is a different adventure every day. I do think it's hard to stay in this market like fully invested. I'm not fully invested in this market. I've been taking profits and taking some trades off for small losses here and there, like the Tesla, just to make sure that I'm ready to move quickly if we happen to do see some volatility. So I think that's the whole game of this market, and look forward to tomorrow, guys. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.